Hey guys, it's Damien.
And I'm Kenady, and thank you so much for joining us. Now today we're discussing 5 habits for a healthy relationship. Now this is not an extensive list. We just chose 5 things that we feel is important. But if we went through all of them, it'll take us hours and hours
to
and
talk
hours.
about.
So let's go ahead and get right into it.
So number 1 is our communication. So many times in relationships, people can think that communication is a chore, but we have to change our perspective and value the communication. So when I was talking to my father before he passed away, he was telling me the different reasons why people get divorced. And number 1 is our communication. And then it went into sexual immorality and pornography, money, and even social media. But when you look at the other 3, it stems from that communication. We have a lack of communication in our relationships.
So when we're communicating with our significant other, we have to first make sure that we are creating a safe space to be honest, not tearing each other down, not being harsh, but respecting each other and trying to communicate and seek understanding. Not just being silent, giving the silent treatment, but choosing the appropriate time to communicate as well. I know a lot of people talk about the halt. Don't talk when what?
You're hungry, angry, late or tired,
or lost.
Or lost.
And so just making sure it's appropriate time where you both can have that effective communication.
So I have a question for you. So in our relationship, we want to get real a little bit. What has been a challenge for you in your communication towards me? Maybe before marriage or even in marriage?
That's a great question. I think for me, it's been making sure that I evaluate that I communicated with you effectively. Like in my perspective, I might have said, babe, I told you that I was going to do this, this, and that. And you're like, no, I don't really remember that, or I didn't really comprehend that.
Yeah.
And so making sure that when we are communicating that the other person received it and that it's the same understanding, because we have to understand that we're 2 individuals and that it's like 2 hard drives and it's passing the signals to the other person, and you want to make sure that you're giving the right signals so you're on the right same page. And so just really evaluating.
I see that in text messages a lot too. When people try to send a text and it never gets through. And he's like, did you get my message? Like, no, I never got it.
Yes.
Right.
So evaluating.
Okay.
What about for you?
So for me, we talked about this a lot. It's called the PPTV, and we have a video on that as well. But it's the pace, the pitch, the tone, and the volume. And for me, my tone and volume goes up.
You said, why are you yelling?
It's like a tone is so heavy and aggressive and competitive. Like I'm an athlete, and so I use that sometimes with you, and you stop me in my tracks. You're like, hey man, like your voice. I was like, oh my bad. Like, and then bringing my volume down a little bit.
Because you have a natural deep voice.
Yeah.
And then, so it's like, it doesn't take long for you to get. I'm like, okay, babe. But you've never been like screaming or anything, but it's just like that volume, having a respectful tone. So yeah.
Okay. Which goes into the next one.
And so that goes into the second point, respect. I think this is a huge one, especially for men. Men need to be respected and honored, but so do women.
Yeah.
And so we have to respect each other physically. We know that we say, men should never put his hands on a woman, but a woman should never put her hands on a man either. We have to respect them, because if we expect that they should just take this beating and not, defend themselves, that's not good. And so respecting each other physically and not just trying to overtake them because they won't hit a woman.
And I've seen this a lot, like in marriages, when my friends call and they say certain things about physical interactions, and I was like, man, we cannot put our hands, and that's one of the things, our values, like I'm not going to put my hands on my wife and she's not going to put her hands on me, you know what I'm saying? So what about respecting with our space? Like, that's a big one, right?
I know, especially with like us working together at home, and COVID and all that. Sometimes you just need a little space. Like, not that I don't like being with you, and so we have this thing like, hey babe, I need 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
It's like, you don't take that offensive. It's like, you can take it whenever appropriate, but just like, hey, I just need a little space just to think. I can tell my attitude's getting low. Let me go spend some time with God, or just relax, being quiet. And so that's a blessing that I think that we put in the foundation of our relationship, to give each other space, not be offensive of it, and just like, hey, this is healthy.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about is respecting also with our verbal. That's like communication, right? We have to respect We are not going to be cussing at each other. We have never cussed at each other as well. And also respect emotionally, giving us a space to share our feelings. We had this yesterday. We need to create space, a safe, honest space where we can share our emotions with each other and just go deeper.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, again, going back to the men, that y'all need to be able to have a space to be emotional and vulnerable. A lot of times they say, oh, if a man cries, he's weak.
Yeah.
He shows that he's hurt or any sentiment. It's like he's soft. And it's like, no, we see the suicide rate for men skyrocket because they're not given a space to share their emotions. Even Jesus wept. If Jesus can cry, men can cry and still be a man, okay? And so just being a safe space, again, for your significant other to take off the mask. Like, you don't have to be macho man, have it all together all the time. That be emotional, and that is healthy. You're not going to go to other things to try and cope, but you're able to say, hey, I can be real and honest with my significant other.
I think the last one we need to talk about is respecting the genders.
Oh, yeah.
Respecting each other's genders. Like, we have gifts and abilities and capabilities as male and females, and so we must respect the other person's gender. You have anything for that?
Yeah, and like just differences. God created us differently, and it's uniquely, and it's both valuable. And so if we're trying to make each other act like more like a man or more like a woman, like there's no uniqueness in that.
That's
and so
good.
Valuing the differences and also not being stereotypical. Like a man should be like this, like we said, a man shouldn't cry, a woman should cry, like all those things. But just being unique, allowing each other to be the expression that God has created us to be without disrespecting and dishonoring that.
That's so good. So number 3 is forgiveness. A healthy habit in relationships, with all relationships that are healthy, is forgiveness. We must learn how to forgive and ask for forgiveness. I think so many times we just see one, but we don't see the other. We have to learn how to forgive in relationships because offense happens.
Yeah.
So I love what Proverbs 19:11 says. It says, a person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. And Kenady, you know this. I have given up my right to be offended. We have to give up our right to be offended. Offense comes everywhere, at church, at work, in the grocery store, on the freeway, on I-75. We can get offended, but we have to give up that right to God and say, God, I don't want to be offended. You know, and there's 2 things and 2 questions that you should ask yourself when somebody offends you. Number 1, do they have a valid point? Do they have a valid point? Sometimes people have a valid point. They're trying to correct you. They're not trying to offend you. They're trying to correct you in a godly fashion. So do they have a valid point, and are you in the wrong? And the second question that you need to ask yourself is, do they have a deeper hurt? Are they hurting? Are they just a negative Nancy or just mean, right? And these are good questions to ask before marriage, because you don't want to enter into your marriage with a mean person and a negative person.
And especially in the climate of today's society, there's so much pressure and stress. You never know what someone is going through.
Yeah.
They might have just lost someone or lost a job, and just continual storm after storm. And so when they get you, they just lash it out on you. And so looking through the lens of compassion, like, I don't know what they're going through, but I can not allow them to bring me down as well too. But
so
offer forgiveness, extend mercy, and that's what Jesus does for us every day. And so it's so important to not hold on to unforgiveness and to communicate the offenses, and so that way you won't have bitterness in your heart, because bitterness can ruin everything. And you might be bitter at someone else, like a coworker or a family member, and that bitterness can flow into your spouse, someone that didn't even
other relationships,
someone that has nothing to do with it. And so removing the right to be offended, forgive those, think highly of people, don't think of the worst, but think of the best. Like, maybe they're just going through something, like, let me pray for them, let me just chuck it, give it to God, pray for them, and just move on, because it's not worth it. Bitterness is not worth it.
So what's number 4?
Number 4 is boundaries. This is so important. Now, if you've been following us, we talk about boundaries all the time. But in this particular thing, it's more so boundaries from other people. Maybe it might be coworkers, friends, or even family. Protecting what God has brought together. And so we're not saying cut off your family, cut off your friends, but limit what type of things they can speak into your relationship, especially those that might not be believers, that might not look through the lens of spiritual eyes, and in talking bad about what you're doing, where your husband is leading, and vice versa. And so setting those healthy boundaries, communicating those healthy boundaries with others, so that way you can protect this unity.
And so what is a boundary? Very simple. It's like, what is a boundary? Some people might come on here and say, what is a boundary? A boundary is a property line. And so many times we have people who are trespassing with bad advice. And so you have to create boundaries in your relationship to not receive unredeemed advice, right? But we're also saying we need community, right? Again, we need community. We need spiritual brothers and sisters to walk alongside us, especially before marriage, so we won't fall into sin.
And also, just came to me, we need to watch what we say to other people about our significant other. Have that boundary, creating a safe space with those that really care about you, but don't go spewing to your family or friends about your significant other in anger, in bitterness, because that can taint the way they view them forever. Because family's like, ain't nobody gonna, talk about my daughter or my son or anything like that. And so making sure that we always keep them in an honorable light, and having those safe spaces where you can open up about issues, but not going to just anybody who might not be able to give you that wise advice.
That's so good. And number 5 is trust. A healthy habit, that is in a healthy relationship is trust. And trust is built over time. It's not overnight. When you plant seeds of trust, it doesn't just sprout up, right? It takes some time for trust. And I want you to think about 2 words real quick, 2 words to think about when we talk about trust. So number 1 is vulnerability. Vulnerability is opening yourself up to harm. You're like, what is he talking about? What? I don't want to get hurt in a relationship, right? But if you think about back in antiquity, when they had walls around cities, they used to have spies in those cities, and they will open up a door and let the army come in. And now they're vulnerable to attack. This is the same thing. We have to open up some of our doors where we have to bring our significant other in and trust them that they won't hurt us, as being vulnerable. And you must be vulnerable in a relationship. What's number 2?
Number 2 is transparency. And so again, taking off that mask when you are being vulnerable with your significant other, sharing what's really bothering you, what's truly honest, how you're truly feeling, not trying to hide it or sugarcoat it, but say, hey, I'm really struggling with X, Y, and Z. I come to you because I trust you, and I want to be open and honest with you and deal with this together. And so it's a risk. It's a risk. But this is your spouse. I know we can always trust God, but we should be able to trust our spouse too. And yes, still Mr.
And significant other too, before.
And significant other, but we have to take a risk. And again, when they get it wrong, hopefully not intentionally, we can forgive them. But trust builds, it's a muscle that can get stronger and stronger as longevity happens.
One of the things I want you to think about in transparency is revealing your scars. Now, transparency says, I'm going to reveal this scar, but also tell you about the information about this scar. That's transparency. But like my wife said, we have to be honest about how we got the scar. Because you can say, look, I got this cut right here. You say, look, my mom beat me. And he's like, no, you actually slid in third base and got that cut. See, you're not honest when you're transparent. So show your scar, but be honest about your scar.
And so this is the 5 habits for a healthy relationship. Again, they're not an extensive list, but this is, I think, some top things that you can start working on to have a healthy relationship. We'd love to hear back from you. If you have any other things that you think will make it for a healthy relationship, put that in the chat, and we hope to see you next time.
And also, if this has brought any type of value to you, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Again, my name is Damien Nash.
And I'm Kenady.
And we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye.